political people you don't like. We're pointing this all out because we can't have this repeated in the United States. We want an end to it right now, whether we have Republican or Democrat administrations. All evidence of your predecessors' total failures. It's time for accountability. And I look forward to hearing about your success in that regard. Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Chairman Grassley, for holding this oversight hearing. Welcome, Attorney General Bondi. I'm glad that we are following this committee's long-standing tradition of regular oversight hearings with the Attorney General, the Director of the FBI, and the Secretary of Homeland Security. These hearings have never been more important as President Trump turns the full force of the federal government on Chicago and other American cities. The assault on the city I am proud to represent is just one example of how President Trump and Attorney General Bondi shut down justice at the Department of Justice even before the president's party, controlling the White House, Senate, and House of Representatives, shut down the government. The Attorney General has systematically weaponized our nation's leading law enforcement agency to protect President Trump and his allies and attack his opponents and, sadly, the American people. You have purged hundreds of senior career officials since you first appeared before us. These men and women had dedicated their careers to protecting the American people. As a result, the department has lost literally thousands of years of law enforcement expertise. To be specific, you disbanded the FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force and the National Cryptocurrency Enforcement Team, despite the growing threat of foreign election interference and the drastic rise in cryptocurrency crimes. You forced out almost 75% of the Civil Rights Division's career attorneys, while hate crimes are on the rise. You fired more than 100 immigration judges, while the immigration case backlog is more than 3 million. You cut the public integrity section from 30 prosecutors to 2, while political corruption skyrockets. During your confirmation hearing, I asked you about your many potential conflicts of interest as a former lobbyist. You responded under oath, quote, "You will consult with career ethics officials within the department and make the appropriate decision," end of quote. But the Justice Department then removed those career ethics officials and put in their place inexperienced political appointees beholden to President and you. And you've effectively shut down the Office of Professional Responsibility, which investigates misconduct by Department of Justice attorneys. Now, with these ethical guardrails out of the way, corruption has run rampant at the Department of Justice. Although you've been a registered foreign agent for Qatar, you did not recuse yourself from signing off on President Trump's solicitation of a free jet from the royal family, even though this gift was clearly illegal. Connections to Attorney General Bondi seem to yield more favorable outcomes for defendants. At least 2 long-running federal prosecutions were abruptly dropped after the defendants hired your brother. It's no surprise that Ed Martin, failed U.S. Attorney nominee you appointed as senior official, said, quote, "No MAGA left behind." Our nation's top law enforcement agency has become a shield for the president and his political allies when they engage in misconduct. Last year, President Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, was allegedly recorded accepting a $50,000 bag of cash in exchange for promising immigration enforcement-related contracts. Under your leadership, the investigation into Mr. Homan was dropped. After President Trump pardoned nearly 1,600 January 6 insurrectionists, including more than 600 charged with assaulting or impeding law enforcement, the Department of Justice is arguing in court that these pardons provide immunity for wholly unrelated crimes in multiple cases. Jared Weiss was filmed on January 6th, encouraging his fellow rioters to attack the Metropolitan Police Department officers. And he said, "F them, kill them." What happened to Mr. Weiss? He's been hired by you as a senior advisor. In February, you said the Epstein client list was, quote, "sitting on my desk right now for review." 8 months later, you still haven't produced these files, and a credible whistleblower told my office that FBI agents were directed to flag any records in which President Trump was mentioned. The Department of Justice ordered the dismissal of corruption charges against the former New York City Mayor Eric Adams in a corrupt backroom deal to secure his cooperation with the president's immigration agenda. Acting U.S. Attorney Daniel Sassoon, a Republican appointed by President Trump, resigned in protest. Acting U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, Eric Siebert, a Republican appointed by President Trump, was forced to resign because he didn't believe there was sufficient evidence to indict New York Attorney General Letitia Adams or former FBI Director James Comey. In his place, President Trump installed his former personal attorney, someone with no prosecutorial experience, to indict Director Comey, which she did. She joins a network of unqualified MAGA loyalists masquerading as federal prosecutors, like Alina Habba, who said she would use her position to, quote, turn New Jersey red, close quote, and Sigil Chattah, who once said that a black political opponent was, quote, should be hanging from an effing crane, end of quote. The president and attorney general attempted to bypass the Senate to install these unqualified extremists. Where do you find these people? Courts have ruled that both Ms. Habba and Ms. Chattah are serving in their roles illegally, jeopardizing countless prosecutions by your office. Why? And that's just one example of how the Department of Justice is making America less safe. Attorney General Bondi shut down the Organized Crime and Drug Enforcement Task Force, OSADEF, which has dismantled thousands of criminal organizations. And you diverted thousands of FBI, DEA, and ATF agents and DOJ prosecutors from their critical missions to carry out the president's mass deportation agenda. Attorney General Bondi, not surprisingly, federal drug prosecutions have dropped to the lowest level in decades. Let me repeat that. Federal prosecutions for drug crimes have dropped to the lowest level in decades on your watch. The Department of Justice has also unilaterally terminated 373 grants that provide critical funding to state and local law enforcement to the tune of $500 million. The 2026 Trump budget would slash the high-intensity drug trafficking areas program known as HIDA by more than a third, from $300 million to $196 million. Instead of taking common sense steps that have proven to help reduce crime, Attorney General, you're focusing on helping President Trump play strongman on television. He has illegally deployed troops to Chicago and other American cities and has threatened to send more. The Justice Department defends this dubious legal basis for these deployments and diverts DOJ personnel and their components to assist in these efforts. These deployments basically target Democratic-run cities and Democratic leaders, ignoring many Republican-led areas of our country with even higher crime rates, and making clear that this is for political theater, not public safety. One particular chaotic raid in Chicago Tuesday last week, aided by the FBI and ATF, which you supervise. In the middle of the night, federal agents pulled women and children out of their beds, crashed down the doors to their homes, destroyed their apartments, zip-tied children and others, and detained immigrants and U.S. citizens alike for hours in vans. When one witness complained about the treatment of the small children, an agent laughed at her and said, "F them kids." On Friday, a federal judge appointed by President Trump held that deploying the National Guard in Portland is illegal. White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller accused her of, quote, legal insurrection, close quote. At a time of rising threats to federal judges, this kind of language is inexcusable. Last week, the President and Secretary Hegseth summoned senior military officials to a political pep rally at Quantico, where the President said he wanted to use American cities as, quote, training grounds for our military. Training grounds for our military. To fight the, quote, enemy within. Chicago is not the enemy. Our fellow Americans are not the enemy. It is abhorrent for the president, who is supposed to represent all Americans regardless of political party, to describe anyone who disagrees with him in this manner. To my Republican colleagues who claim the previous administration weaponized the Department of Justice, President Biden retained President Trump's FBI Director Christopher Wray, who President Trump then fired. President Biden never directed the Attorney General to prosecute his political opponents. President Biden never fired his own political appointees for refusing to prosecute his targets. What has taken place since January 20th, 2025 would make even President Nixon recoil. This is your legacy, Attorney General Bondi. In 8 short months, you have fundamentally transformed the Justice Department and left an enormous stain in American history. It will take decades to recover. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Would you please rise so I can give you swear? Do you affirm the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please be seated and give us your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Grassley and Ranking Member Durbin, and every member of this committee. I'm grateful for the opportunity to testify in front of you today. First, please join me in remembering, as you said, Chairman Grassley, all the Jewish people who lost their lives in the October 7th attacks 2 years ago today. Also, please let's pray for all the hostages and the families of all of those individuals. They are a critical reminder of our central mission here at the Department of Justice, protecting the safety and security of the American people. That is why, even when the government is otherwise shut down because of the Democrats, the department's law enforcement officers and prosecutors are hard at work fighting crime, keeping our streets safe, and protecting you from the threats, foreign and domestic. When I was confirmed as the 87th Attorney General of the United States, I took office with 2 main goals: to end the weaponization of justice and return the department to its core mission of fighting violent crime. As to ending the weaponization of justice, we learned that former FBI secretly investigated you and your colleagues. Why? They wanted to take President Trump off the playing field. They were playing politics with law enforcement powers and will go down as a historic betrayal of public trust. This is the kind of conduct that shatters the American people's faith in our law enforcement system. We will work to earn that back every single day. We are returning to our core mission of fighting real crime. While there is more work to do, I believe in 8 short months, we have made tremendous progress towards those ends. Our federal surges in Washington, D.C. and Memphis are a perfect example of how the Department of Justice should operate. We created strong partnerships with local leadership, working hand in hand with both cities to send resources where they were needed most. The results speak for themselves. We have made more than 3,800 arrests here in Washington while seizing more than 365 illegal guns. In Memphis, we have already made more than 300 arrests and close to 80 illegal guns in just a week. We are replicating that tough-on-crime approach throughout this country. Under the leadership of Director Kash Patel, the FBI is doing outstanding investigative work to keep American people safe. The FBI just conducted a months-long operation called Summer Heat, which resulted in over 8,600 arrests from June to September. More than 6,500 arrests fell under the FBI's violent crime and gang program. Under the leadership of Administrator Terry Cole, the DEA has seized 47.9 million fentanyl pills and 4,500 kilos of fentanyl powder. That represents 370 million deadly doses, 370 million. The DEA is dismantling violent cartel drug trafficking networks across this country, including the seizure of nearly 470 million in criminal assets. Under the leadership of Gadi Serralta, our U.S. Marshals have been the tip of the spear on federal surges and protecting judges and elected officials. Our Marshals have arrested more than 51,000 fugitives nationwide since January 20th. Under the leadership of Acting Director Dan Driscoll, ATF has taken more than 23,000 illegal guns off our streets. 3,400 of those guns have been linked to trafficking between the U.S. and Mexico. My attorneys have done incredible work advancing President Trump's agenda and protecting the executive branch from judicial overreach. We've been sued more than 400 times since January 20th. Judges have issued more than 90 temporary restraining orders against us, more than the previous several administrations combined. Despite the unprecedented degree of activism we've seen from the lower courts, we have never ignored a court order. And why would we? We have secured a historic 22 victories at the Supreme Court alone, with more to come. Our civil rights attorneys are fighting discrimination and anti-Semitism. Our criminal attorneys are prosecuting violent criminals and foreign terrorists every single day. I look forward to continuing this work at the Department of Justice, and I look forward to testifying before you today. Thank you, Chairman.
I forgot to turn on the microphone. Let me start over again. We have 10-minute rounds. I've asked Senator Blackburn to chair between 10:30 and 11. I hope that we can have good decorum during this hearing, treat each other with respect. General Bondi, just in case you get cut off with something that you don't get to answer your question when that senator's done, if you ask me for a little bit of time, not a lot of time, but a little bit of time to finish your answer, I'd be glad to give that to you. So starting myself, you inherited a bloated bureaucracy. It requires reorientation to better serve your mission of the department. That would include reassessing grants disguised to help Americans, but many were partisan pet projects. It also requires reallocation of resources to better serve the American people. On this issue, I've got two questions. What updates can you share with the committee about your review and grant DOJ and grants that DOJ has reassessed? Just give us some examples, don't I know?
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. During my appearance at the department's budget hearings, I acknowledged that some grants were mistakenly terminated, and we have made a process to correct that. All grant termination appeals will be individually considered for alignment with our current policies, which are strengthening law enforcement and protecting victims. Recipients are given the opportunity to appeal a grant termination consistent with the rules by writing to the Assistant Attorney General. Of the 5,800 discretionary grants that were reviewed, only 376, approximately 7%, were terminated. So far, OJP has turned back on 18 awards, 17 appeals have been denied, and the rest are actively being reviewed, with decisions expected soon.
My colleagues on the other side claim that your department has reallocated resources to immigration enforcement, and it's had a negative impact on law enforcement. We know that drugs and crimes are very much a part of immigration enforcement, so these attacks are clearly off the mark. Explain your view of these misguided assertions.
Chairman, every day our FBI, DEA, ATF, and now U.S. Marshals working on a task force with Homeland Security are out there keeping Americans safe and getting illegal aliens out of our country, many of whom have committed violent crimes in this country. Our agents will continue to fight violent crime in this country, working hand in hand. One example is right here in Washington, D.C., We have the DC task force that has been incredibly successful. We are so proud of the work that has done. We have been working hand in hand with the local officials here in DC, and we are very proud of that work. And we're taking that to Tennessee and around this country to keep Americans safe.
I won't repeat the things I've said about Arctic frost, but we had this recent revelation yesterday of my Republican senators being targeted by the government, underscoring the point about Arctic frost. When taken in context with widespread government weaponization against Trump and conservatives in the last decade, the conduct arguably is worse than Watergate. So I got two questions along this line. How many Department of Justice and FBI personnel have been held accountable for their partisan and constitutional questionable conduct, and what was their punishment? If you could give a few examples or follow up in writing, since there's so many people that fall into this category.
Yes, Senator. Yes, Chairman, we will.
So you want to answer that in writing? Yeah, okay.
Yes, the exact number I can answer in writing. Yes.
Okay. Was Attorney General, on the same subject, was Attorney General Garland, Director Wray, and or President Biden's White House aware of the FBI targeting Republican senators? Did they approve it? Now let's be clear, either they knew and allowed it to happen, or they didn't know, and if they didn't know, it points to a lack of oversight of Jack Smith's runaway case.
Chairman Grassley, that's what we've been talking about when we refer to the weaponization of government. Operation Arctic Frost was an unconstitutional, undemocratic abuse of power. During Arctic Frost, the FBI also placed 92 linked Republican individuals and Republican groups, such as Charlie Kirk's Turning Point, on their list. This is the kind of conduct that shattered the American people's faith in our government, as I said in my opening statement. We are ending this weaponization. Our FBI is targeting violent criminals, child predators, and other lawbreakers, not sitting senators who happen to be from the wrong political party. Several of your colleagues sitting at this dais were targeted, and others. We will continue to stop that throughout the Justice Department. That is the ultimate weaponization of government.
Have you sought grand jury secrecy waivers so that all of Arctic Frost documents can be produced to Congress? And if not, do you plan to do that?
Chairman Grassley, I will be working directly with the Director Patel on this issue, and there's not much more we can say about the issue for obvious reasons at this time.
Okay. Public Safety Officers Benefit Program, PSOB, provides benefits to law enforcement and first responders if they're disabled or killed in the line of duty. Affected family members may also benefit. My oversight and a government accountability office report shows that some claims have taken thousands of days to conclude. PSOB applicants have also informed my office that they've been left in tears with disrespectful ways they've been treated by the government. Question number 1 and 2 in this area, but I'll start just with 1. What actions have been taken to hold DOJ officials accountable for their failures to manage the program and treat applicants with respect?
Chairman Grassley, as stated earlier, there have been many terminations from the Department of Justice, and we stand by all of those. Many of those are subject to active litigation. This Department of Justice will treat everyone with respect, and we will do everything in our power to help citizens of this country. Please reach out to us with any individual cases, and I will personally look at them for you, Chairman.
Okay. So if you'll provide that information, that was my second question. So now let's go on to regarding the initial FBI 1023 document that I made public last Congress. That document mentioned 1, text messages, 2, audio recordings, and 3, financial records that allegedly approved a bribery scheme with the Biden family and foreign interest. I asked Director Patel if his predecessors made any effort to determine whether these records existed. He answered no. What steps has the department taken to determine whether these records exist? One way or another, this matter ought to be put to rest.
Chairman Grassley, I know Director Patel is working hard on this with the members of the FBI.
Okay. So we don't know if these records exist, or you just can't say that publicly at this point?
I don't want to discuss any of that publicly,
Okay.
Director.
The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act includes a safeguard to prevent political weaponization. The reauthorization mandated certain members and their staffs shall be entitled to attend any proceedings of the FISA court. Former Biden DOJ Assistant Attorney General Matt Olson drafted a privacy agreement that allowed the department to hide information from Congress during FISA proceedings. Matt Olson made a career out of targeting President Trump and his allies, so it's not surprising that he would attempt to hinder congressional oversight or cover up for the Biden regime. I want to make sure that you get rid of the ridiculous and misguided Olson memo. When can you tell me that will be done?
We will notify you, Chairman Grassley. Thank you.
Okay. Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Madam Attorney General, let me ask you this question. Were you consulted by the White House before they deployed National Guard troops to cities in the United States?
I am not going to discuss any internal conversations with the White House.
You won't even say whether you talked to the White House about this?
I am not going to discuss any internal conversations with the White House with you, Ranking Member.
I noticed that. What's the secret? Why do you want to keep this secret? The American people don't know the rationale behind the deployment of National Guard troops in my state. The word is, and I think it's been confirmed by the White House, they are going to transfer Texas National Guard units to the state of Illinois. What's the rationale for that?
Yeah, Chairman, as you shut down the government, you voted to shut down the government, and you're sitting here, our law enforcement officers aren't being paid. They're out there working to protect you. I wish you loved Chicago as much as you hate President Trump. And currently, the National Guard are on the way to Chicago. If you're not going to protect your citizens, President Trump will.
I've been on this committee for more than 20 years. That's the kind of testimony you expect from this administration. A simple question as to whether or not they had a legal rationale for deploying National Guard troops becomes grounds for a personal attack. I think it's a legitimate question. It's my responsibility. She refuses to answer as to whether she had any conversation with the White House about deploying national troops to my state. That's an indication, I'm afraid, where we are politically in this place. Let me ask you another question. I want to, if you will, hold on a second. Make sure I got the right page of facts here. You testified under oath when you last before this committee that before your appointment to Attorney General, you had served as a representative of some sort for the royal family of Qatar. There was an issue that came before you in May when President Trump accepted a $400 million luxury jet from the royal family of Qatar for temporary use as Air Force One before it's permanently gifted to the Trump Presidential Library Foundation. The Constitution unequivocally bestows on Congress the power to control whether any officer of the United States, including the President, may accept a gift, quote, from any king, prince, or foreign state, end of quote. And this gift clearly violates the statutory regime enacted by Congress. You've refused to answer a letter I sent to you 5 months ago, asking the legal rationale you relied on to advise President Trump to accept this unprecedented gift from your former legal client. Can you make a promise today that you will disclose that?
Disclose what, Ranking Member?
I assume there was a letter or some sort of statement from your office to the White House to advise them that you felt it was permissible?
First, to address my role with Qatar, as I addressed with you during my confirmation hearing, I disclosed it in my SJQ. In private practice, I worked for Qatar for anti-human trafficking for the World Cup. That was my only involvement, and I made that very clear, and I'm very proud of everything I've done with anti-human trafficking. Obviously, in preparing any advice for the president on a jet or anything else, we consult with the Office of Legal Counsel. The confidentiality applies to their input as well. And Chairman, if you would approve and vote to approve, as Chairman Grassley said, excuse me, Ranking Member, as Chairman Grassley said, my employees, we would answer your letters a lot faster, yet you're stalling them at every stop. And to go back to your previous question, your city has a murder rate 5 times higher than New York's. 571 homicides last year. If you were serious about protecting your people, you would be asking this administration for help. You're saying that we're coming into your state and your city. We're there to help make America safe and Illinois safe, whether or not you want to.
I believe cutting federal grant programs to law enforcement in my state and across the nation does not make us any safer, and you've done just that. You've supplanted that decision by sending in National Guard troops to California and other places. That is a situation where the governors have not asked for that help. If you truly wanted to do this on a bipartisan basis, you wouldn't defy a governor, you would work with them. I'm prepared to do that. I'm prepared to work with this administration. But cutting these grants to law enforcement does not make us any stronger as a nation or give us the tools we need to reduce crime in Chicago. Now, I'd just like to ask you, when it came to this Qatar situation, did you consult with the ethics office in the Department of Justice before making your decision on this gift of a jet?
Chairman, I didn't gift a jet to anyone. My Office of Legal Counsel provides confidential advice to the president, to the White House, period. And you're conflating two issues. Cutting grants, I was very clear about what grants we've cut and what grants we haven't, only 7%. And if you have a grant in Illinois that you think that I've cut that is protecting law enforcement officers or your people, you personally call me and I will work with you to turn that grant back on. I think many of the Democrats here can tell you, I have worked with them to turn grants back on. There's an appeal process. Tell me a specific grant that I have turned off in Illinois that would help law enforcement, and I will work with you. But you have not done that.
Did you take a look?
The National Guard is on the way right now as we speak. Oh, by the way, so is Director Patel and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. You're sitting here grilling me, and they're on their way to Chicago to keep your state safe.
Madam Attorney General, it's my job to grill you. Investigation of your agency is part of my responsibility and this committee. You may not like the experience, but others have weathered the storm and answered questions in a respectful manner.
Can you tell me the grants,
Yes.
Ranking Member, please?
Take a look at the president's budget on HIDA grants. What happens to it in his proposed budget?
I'd be glad to meet with you on the
It's
grants.
cut by 1/3 from $300 million to 196. That's one example of a grant that works, and your administration has suggested cutting it in the budget lies ahead. I want to ask you about items in a letter I sent you in July that you have not answered. In February, you made a public claim that the Epstein client list was, quote, sitting on my desk right now for review, end of quote. You then produced already public information and no client list at a major media event hosted at the White House. Attorney General Bondi, why did you publicly claim to have the Epstein client list waiting for your review and then produce nothing relevant to that claim?
Senator Durbin, if you listen to my entire clip on that, I said I had not reviewed it yet, that it was sitting on my desk along with the JFK files, the Martin Luther King files, and I said I had not yet reviewed it. And if you see our memo on Epstein, you will see, excuse me, our memo on Epstein clearly points out that there was no client list, our July 6th memo. You also didn't let me respond to the HIDA question. The budget transfers $196 million for high-intensity drug trafficking areas to the Office of Justice Programs, OJP. The Justice Department will continue to administer those grants under OJP in 2026.
Going back to the Epstein files, according to another whistleblower who made a protected disclosure to my office, you pushed the FBI to review approximately 100,000 Epstein-related records on an arbitrarily short deadline in March, and the FBI was directed to flag any documents that mentioned President Trump. Nothing came of that review until July, when DOJ and FBI released an unsigned memo stating, quote, "there's no incriminating client list." Why was the July 7th memo unsigned?
The July 7th memo came from the FBI and the Department of Justice. Director Patel answered those questions very clear. And, you know, Senator Durbin, I find it very interesting that you refused repeated Republican requests to release the Epstein flight logs in 2023 and 2024. You fought that. Did you take money from Reid Hoffman, campaign donations, who was a huge Epstein friend? Why did you fight for years? Why did you fight to not disclose the flight logs, Senator Durbin?
I can tell you I did not refuse. One of the senators here wished to produce those logs, and I asked her to put it in writing, and she never did.
Yeah, I think Senator Blackburn would quarrel with you on that.
Well, I will quarrel with you as to Reid, somebody that you mentioned I never heard of.
Reid Hoffman.
So who gave the order to flag records related to President Trump?
To flag records for President Trump?
To flag any records which included his name.
I'm not going to discuss anything about that with you, Senator.
Eventually, you're going to have to answer for your conduct in this. You won't do it today, but eventually you will. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
I got
Mr. Chairman.
something here.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, since Senator Durbin referred to me, I would really appreciate the opportunity to correct the record.
Proceed.
Because Senator Durbin knows I repeatedly asked for those flight logs. I brought up the subpoena. You even shut down the committee because you didn't want that, and you know I submitted that in writing, and you continue to misrepresent that, and I am not going to let that record stand.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator Durbin.
I just want to make it clear that the reason the committee business ended was that your side invoked the 2-hour rule. Point number 2 is I asked you if you wanted any documents like flight logs to put it in writing. You never did.
Yes, sir, I did, and your staff knows that I did.
No,
We'll submit once again
send me a copy
the
of that,
information to you. We've done that several times, but we'll be happy to once again send it to you. I think your staff doesn't show that to you.
Well, as I started to say about the emolument clause and Democrats bringing that up in regard to Qatar, back in March of 2016, they didn't care anything about my bringing up the emolument clause in regard. I wrote to the Obama Justice Department. That letter was based on Secretary Clinton's 2009 to 2013 financial disclosures when she was Secretary of State. Those disclosures showed that her husband participated in at least 62 events with foreign states. Some of those were speaking events with connections to foreign governments, and some speaking events were financially supported by foreign governments. 2 examples, Bill Clinton received hundreds of thousands of dollars for appearance sponsored by Middle Eastern governments. Bill Clinton also received $200,000 for a speech connected to the Chinese government, and I don't recall getting any help from my Democrat colleagues on that investigation. Senator Graham.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. So I want to make sure I got this clear. If a Democrat or a Republican senator has a problem with a grant that's been canceled or reduced, you would be glad to talk to them.
Yes, Senator, and I have been doing that as well.
There have been Democratic members who called you.
They have spoken to my office, yes, Senator.
And you've tried to respond.
On either side of the aisle, of course. If it has anything to do with law
So-
enforcement or victims,
And that includes Senator Durbin. If he's got a problem, he can call you and you'll try to respond.
absolutely.
Thank you. How many illegal immigrants are in Chicago?
Ooh.
Does anybody know?
I do, countless. What we have seen since January 20th, Senator Graham, is a 1,000% increase in violent attacks against our ICE officers.
Right. But I just want to know, is there like 10 or 100,000? Does anybody know?
There have been multiple, and we have made multiple arrests, of course, involving violent gangs
Yeah,
in Chicago,
Right.
throughout Illinois.
Right. So the only reason I ask that is Chicago is sanctuary city. Do they help ICE deal with illegal immigration, or they're sanctuary city? Do you know?
They are not cooperating, and I would ask that, I wish Senator Durbin would condemn the governor for not cooperating with our law enforcement officers.
The only reason I mention this, if you're a sanctuary city, any place in the country, you're making it difficult for the rest of us. Because word gets out, if you get to a certain city, maybe Chicago being one of them, that you're home free, and that just encourages more illegal immigration. Do you deal with that? Do I agree with that?
I do, Senator Graham, and can I add something to that?
Sure.
Please. One of our biggest wins was against the Sinaloa cartel, and that came in Chicago. The state of Illinois has a Trust Act, which prevents local law enforcement from cooperating with our federal immigration authorities. And that's what I was trying to talk to Senator Durbin about. On September 15th, our partners at ICE arrested an illegal alien from Mexico for beating a 21-year-old man to death. He had been imprisoned in Illinois prior to the murder and was released under Illinois' Trust Act. We filed multiple lawsuits in Illinois for sanctuary policies, specifically in-state tuition for illegal aliens and obstructing employers from verifying citizenship. You can't make this up. On September 5th, a federal grand jury in Chicago indicted a major Sinaloa cartel boss, narco-terrorism, guns, and drug charges. On July 11th, we announced a guilty plea for Ovidio Guzman Lopez. You may know him as the son of El Chapo, one of the worst narco-terrorists in the world. In the world,
In
Senators.
Chicago.
In Chicago. In Chicago. He entered a guilty plea to drug conspiracy and 2 counts of knowingly engaging in a continuing criminal enterprise in the state of Illinois. I could continue with fentanyl. I could continue with child predators in Illinois.
Well, thank you. I think I've seen numbers over 100,000. So Chicago and other sanctuary cities, you're making it harder for us to deal with illegal immigration by doing what you're doing. And I am glad President Trump is trying to change those policies. And if you need the National Guard to bring order out of chaos, so be it from my point of view. Now let's get back to the topic sort of at hand here about how the law is being used politically. In September 2022, Attorney General James from New York basically said in a campaign that she would go after Trump, his business transactions, and his family with full force. November the 15th, 2022, Trump announces his candidacy for president. November 2022, 3 days after Trump announced his re-election campaign, Jack Smith was appointed by Garland to be special counsel to look at classified information, document mishandling, and trying to undermine the 2020 election. In March, President Trump was indicted in Manhattan of 2023, just after announcing 34 felony counts. And what they did is they took misdemeanors and turned them into felonies by using a legal theory that no one in the history of Manhattan had ever been charged with. June 2023, a federal grand jury in the District Court for the Southern District, Florida, indicted President Trump on 37 charges regarding classified information. Now, all I can say is that taking a hammer to a hard drive in bleach bit apparently doesn't make the cut. Having documents in the garage of President Biden doesn't make the cut. In August of 2023, he was indicted yet again regarding the 2020 election. So all I can say is that in September 27th, Jack Smith's team asked for my phone records and 7 other senators. Now that's just the 2024 election. Comey, are you aware of the fact that in August, Comey, then director FBI, August of 2016, was in a meeting at the White House where it was discussed that by Brennan, then CIA director, that there was intelligence that maybe the Clinton campaign was trying to cook up a narrative that Trump was a Russian asset?
Senator, I believe that has been reported publicly, but I cannot comment on that.
Okay, well, I'm just telling you. Now, this is a campaign for president in 2016. In July, they open up Crossfire Hurricane. In August, they have a discussion in front of President Biden that there's intel that maybe this is generated by his political opponent. Nothing happened. In September, are you aware of the fact that the intelligence community sent a memo to the FBI director detailing intelligence that suggests it's Clinton's campaign is behind the idea that Trump is colluding or cooperating with the Russians?
Senator, I believe that has been reported.
And that was addressed to the FBI director and Mr. Strzok, this memo. Are you aware that he told this committee, I don't recall that, the FBI director?
Senator, I can't discuss anything.
Well, I can tell you this. What the hell would you recall? You're the sitting FBI director. There's a campaign for president going on. You've opened up an investigation believing that the Republican candidate may be a Russian asset. And now all of a sudden, less than a month later, 2 months later, you have 2 inquiries, 2 events to suggest it may be his political opponent. Did anybody in the FBI inform the FISA court or anyone else about this activity that you know of?
I can't discuss that matter, as you know, Senator Graham.
Should they have? Is there a requirement by law enforcement to tell the court if their warrant is being sought or a defendant that there's exculpatory information out there about you?
In general, of course, Senator.
So, to the country, the FBI director gets a memo from the intel community. This may be all a political plot by his opponent. They didn't do a damn thing. Are you familiar with the Steele dossier?
Yes, Senator.
That was a dossier prepared and paid for by the Clinton campaign. Are you aware that it was that document was used to get a warrant on 5 different occasions against Carter Page, an American citizen?
Yes, Senator, and that has been
Are you
reported.
aware of the fact in February 2017, after Trump is president, the person who gave Christopher Steele the information, the Russian guy, told the FBI, the information I provided you was all bar talk, hearsay, and not reliable. Are you aware of that?
Yes, Senator.
Was there ever an effort by the FBI to tell the FISA court about evidence that the man who helped prepare the document retracted his statement?
I can't discuss that, Senator.
Should there have been?
Can't discuss that.
You wonder why we're looking at Comey? Give me a break. Why are we looking at Comey? Because he ran an FBI and personally knew about exculpatory information and let it slide. How in the hell can 2 FBI agents interview a man who says the document you're using against a sitting president to suggest he may be a Russian agent or Carter Page that is now no longer reliable? How does that not get to the court? Can you tell me how that doesn't get to the court? You can't, can you?
I can't, Senator, and I
Can
can't
you tell me
discuss it.
why my phone records, when I'm the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, were sought by the Jack Smith agents? Why did they ask to know who I called and what I was doing from January 4th to the 7th? Can you tell me that?
No, Senator, and there were 8 senators in total.
Do you think that was an abuse of power?
Senator, I cannot discuss whether there is or is not an ongoing investigation. If I may add one thing, they also wasted $50 million on what you just described, trying to put President Trump in jail prior to the election.
Before Senator Whitehouse, I want to introduce into the record what is called the Durham Annex. The annex is a declassified appendix to John Durham's report about Crossfire Hurricane. The Durham Annex contains information exposing a reported Clinton campaign plan to falsify and tie President Trump to Russia. For years, I've fought to assemble and publicize all the facts surrounding Durham investigation, Crossfire Hurricane, and related matters. The Durham Annex was declassified as a large part because of Attorney General Bondi.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
may I ask you a question?
if I can answer it, yes. Go
Thank you,
ahead.
Mr. Chairman. Are you going to hold a separate hearing on your whistleblower account of the FBI investigation of 8 United States senators?
I think we need, my answer to your question is, I think we need to wait until we see what the FBI can report and whether it's necessary to have a hearing. Right now, I haven't ruled one out, but I haven't made a decision.
And what year do you think that will happen in?
I want the FBI to be a thorough investigation of it and report to us what information they can give us, and I don't know how long that'll take them.
With respect, are you giving them a certain period of time?
I have not given them a certain period of time. I'll discuss that matter with my staff and see if that needs to be done.
Okay, if civil suits are filed against the perpetrators at the FBI, will that facilitate your investigation?
Well, what's the question again?
If the 8 senators who were spied upon sue the hell out of the Department of Justice and the perpetrators involved, will that facilitate their investigation and or yours? I guess what I'm getting to is I don't understand why we don't have a separate hearing. I find this breathtaking.
Yeah. It's just been 24 hours since the FBI investigated on it. Please give me an opportunity to sort through all this.
Fair enough. I just don't want to wait 24 years to get an answer.
Yeah. We do have an active investigation going on through my staff. I want to make that very clear. Mr. Whitehouse, or Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Bondi, good morning.
Good morning.
What became of the $50,000 in cash that the FBI paid to Mr. Homan in a paper bag, evidently?
Senator, as Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche recently stated, the investigation of Mr. Homan was subjected to a full review by the FBI, agents, and DOJ prosecutors. They found no credible evidence of any wrongdoing.
And that was not my question. My question was, what became of the $50,000 in cash that the FBI delivered, evidently in a paper bag, to Mr. Homan?
Senator, I'd look at your facts.
Are you saying that they did not deliver $50,000 in cash to Mr. Homan?
Senator, as recently stated, the investigation of Mr. Homan was subjected to a full
That's a different
review
question.
by the FBI agents,
That's a
by
different
Department
question.
of Justice prosecutors. They found no evidence of wrongdoing.
That's a different question. What became of the $50,000? Did the FBI get it back?
Mr. Whitehouse, Senator Whitehouse, you're welcome to talk to the FBI.
The report to you, can't you answer this question?
Senator Whitehouse, you're welcome to discuss this with Director Patel.
Did Homan keep the $50,000?
As Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche recently stated, the investigation of Mr.
Never mind.
Holman
I can
was
see I'm not going to get a
through
straight
full
answer from you
review
to a very simple
by
question.
the FBI agents and the DOJ. They
you
found
know-
no credible evidence of wrongdoing. You know, you're very concerned about money and people taking money, and you rail against
wait a
dark
second,
money.
wait a second, wait a
Yet you
second,
work with dark
wait a
money
second.
groups all the time, Senator
Wait a second.
Whitehouse.
Did you know whether or not in that investigation they looked at whether the $50,000 payment to Mr. Homan was declared by him on his tax returns?
Senator, I would be more concerned if I were you when you talk about corruption and money that when you pushed for legislation that would subsidize your wife's company.
The questions here are actually pretty specific. So having you respond with completely irrelevant far-right internet talking points really is not very helpful here. I'd like, Mr. Chairman, you generally like to have us be able to get answers to know, and we'll follow up with the QFR. And to the extent Patel wants to answer, that would be great as well. What happened to the $50,000? Did Homan keep it? Did the FBI get it back? If he kept it, did he put it on his tax returns? Pretty simple questions. Homan was the same guy who said there was a deal with Eric Adams. He said, if Adams doesn't come through, I'll be back. I'll be in his office, up his butt, saying, where the hell is the agreement we came to? Which brings us to the OPR investigation of prosecutorial misconduct by Emil Bovee, because he was also involved in that transaction. Yeah. What became of the OPR investigation of prosecutorial misconduct by Emil Bovee?
Yeah, Senator Whitehouse, to correct you for one moment, that would be the Honorable Judge Emil J. Bovee III to you.
Not at the time of this. He was an employee of the Department of Justice. And what became of the OPR investigation?
It's all pending litigation,
misconduct?
Senator. I can't discuss pending litigation nor personnel matters.
OPR customarily publicly says when there's an investigation, and at the end of it, they provide a summary. Why can't you say whether there's an OPR investigation and whether, if it's concluded, there's a summary?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss personnel matters.
Even public ones?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss personnel matters.
So, Kash Patel told this committee that his grand jury testimony after immunization, after initially pleading the Fifth, was, and I quote, sealed by the Department of Justice. How and when and why was his testimony sealed, and by whom?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss any testimony, especially testimony that could be sealed with you.
No, the question is, was it or was it not sealed?
Senator, I'm not going to discuss that with you.
Well, he also said that he worked with the Department of Justice to have his transcript released publicly. How and when was his transcript released? Presumably, if he released it publicly, that's something you can discuss because it's public.
Well, Senator, I believe you discussed that with Director Patel.
And I'm asking you because he said the Department of Justice made this decision and you run the Department of Justice.
I would refer that to Director Patel.
Even though you run the Department of Justice and he testified that the Department of Justice released his transcript publicly.
If it is released publicly, we will get you a copy, Senator, gladly.
If, being a rather important word there, when your FBI director testified that that was a fact. Treasury compiles suspicious activity reports, referred to often as SARs, that DOJ receives automatically. Hundreds related to accounts of Jeffrey Epstein, how many of those Treasury SARs did you or Director Patel investigate?
Senator, I'm not sure if you're concerned because you took money, I believe, did you, from Reid Hoffman, one of Epstein's closest confidants, not only once but twice in 2018 and 2024, if that's correct. But, Senator, did you ask Merrick Garland any of this over the last 4 years when he sat before you? This investigation has been going on. This investigation was closed. Did you ask Alex Acosta that?
And Patel came to office, you said you would look into this. There were hundreds of suspicious activity reports. Some people would deduce from the fact that they are called suspicious activity reports that there might be suspicious activity. And yet you seem to have looked at 0 of those suspicious activity reports involving Jeffrey Epstein accounts. Let me ask you something else. There's been public reporting that Jeffrey Epstein showed people photos of President Trump with half-naked young women. Do you know if the FBI found those photographs in their search of Jeffrey Epstein's safe or premises or otherwise? Have you seen any such thing?
You know, Senator Whitehouse, you sit here and make salacious remarks, once again trying to slander President Trump left and right, when you're the one who was taking money from one of Epstein's closest confidants, I believe, I could be wrong, correct me, Reid Hoffman, who was with Jeffrey Epstein on multiple occasions. And the senator sitting right next to you tried to block the flight logs from being released. Yet you're grilling me on President Trump and some photograph with Epstein? Come on.
The question is, did the FBI find those photographs that have been discussed publicly by a witness who claimed Jeffrey Epstein showed them to him? You don't know anything about that? Okay. Here's what well, no, we cut to something else. The Marshal Service is supposed to protect our federal judges. I have asked repeatedly for the Marshal Service to let me know if they are investigating or being inhibited from investigating whether or not there is orchestration of threats against federal judges, whether under either conspiracy laws or racketeering enterprise laws or aiding and abetting laws, whatever. But as you know, there's the person who says the threat, and then there may very well be somebody orchestrating the threat behind them. Is the Marshal Service allowed to investigate orchestration of threats, and do you know if they've taken one step to do so?
May I answer the question, Chairman Grassley? The time has expired.
I think it's the convention of the committee that if I've started my question in my time, you may answer the question.
I was asking the chairman.
Okay, before I go to Cornyn.
She wants to answer the question, Chairman.
Oh, please go ahead. I thought you said you didn't want to answer it.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
sir. Thank you. Senator Whitehouse, I would be happy to sit down with you regarding any threat to any federal judge in this country. We take threats very seriously. I will set a meeting with you, with Director Serralta of the U.S. Marshals, and I will be there. And we will talk about any threats on federal judges,
including orchestration.
Who threatened them or who orchestrated them.
Bingo. Thank you.
Okay. Before Cornyn speaks, I get kind of amused about my Democratic colleagues bringing up Treasury suspicious activity reports regarding Epstein. When Senator Johnson and I issued our Biden family reports in 2020, we used information from these very same type of documents. And you know what? We were criticized by our Democratic colleagues for doing so, and for years they ignored the evidence of the Biden family criminality. I don't think my colleagues can have it both ways. Senator Cornyn.
General Bondi, 6 out of 10 Americans say they live from paycheck to paycheck. And I'm sure that includes a lot of federal employees, Border Patrol, FBI agents, people who support them, frontline prosecutors. Do you find it somewhat inconsistent that our Democratic colleagues claim to support law enforcement and the rule of law, but yet they vote to deny those same individuals the pay which they've earned?
Yes, Senators, our law enforcement agencies, DEA, ATF, FBI, U.S. Marshals, and all the other federal agencies, Homeland Security, Treasury, all the agencies, all of my federal prosecutors, all of our employees are working tirelessly, national security, around the clock to keep this country safe and to keep this world safe. Yet, the Democrats voted to shut the government down, and they are out there working without a paycheck, with families at home, risking their lives every single day. Thank you for pointing that out, and thank you for caring, Senator Cornyn.
So let's get back to some basics. The Constitution of the United States is the supreme law of the land, is it not?
Yes, sir.
Applies to all Americans, the entire country. Federal law, likewise, applies to the entire nation, does it not?
Yes, Senator.
And so when federal law enforcement agents go to cities like Chicago to enforce federal law, they are acting within their authority, are they not?
Yes, Senator Cornyn.
So on what legal basis would a governor or a mayor say, we're going to deny or prevent a federal law enforcement agent from enforcing federal law? What would be the legal basis for them to do that?
You know, Senator, there's not one. And as I stated, there were 571 homicides in Chicago last year. And that's why right now Director Patel and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche are on their way to Chicago. I've been to Memphis. They're in Chicago right now to protect the people of Illinois. And what Senator Graham, the point he was trying to make earlier, was that when you don't cooperate with law enforcement, if I was a TDA member, if I was a Sinaloa cartel narco-terrorist, you know where I'd go? Chicago, because they're not enforcing the law. And they're running their operations, as I stated earlier, two of the biggest terrorists, narco-terrorists, we arrested right in Chicago because it was a safe haven for them. And they're operating these networks around our entire country. So we are going to keep our entire country safe. We're going to protect all Americans. If these senators aren't going to vote to open our government, to let these people, our people, work with paychecks, they're going to do it anyway, whether or not the locals are cooperating with them. We're going to be there protecting all Americans in this country, Senator Cornyn.
I find it, the comparison between the nation's, Washington, D.C., here in the nation's capital, where the mayor has welcomed the federal law enforcement agents, which as I travel around the city, are providing a level of deterrence against crime that I have not seen before. And Washington, D.C. happens to be one of the most dangerous metropolitan areas in the country. So seeing what the response has been by local officials here in Washington, D.C., seeing how the public here who visits here as tourists from Texas and elsewhere, how they're welcoming this federal law enforcement presence, it strikes me as a stark contrast between what we've seen in places like Chicago. And I just don't understand how elected officials who are sworn to uphold the law and the Constitution of the United States could take the position that, no, we don't want a safer community in our major cities that have a high level of crime like Chicago. Doesn't it strike you as bizarre?
Senator Cornyn, I don't understand it either, because we've been working hand in hand right here in D.C. with Mayor Bowser. She has been an incredible partner at making D.C. safe again. We've been working with her. We've been working with the police chief. We've been working with their staff, and the numbers speak for themselves. 3,156 arrests, 294 illegal guns seized. I think the number's probably higher today. Carjackings down 87%, violent crime down 45%. Right here in the nation's capital. I've been out there countless times before they go out on the streets, and I'm watching the DC Metro Police. I'm watching them with the Transit Authority Police, who of course keep our metros safe. I'm watching them with our DEA, FBI, ATF, U.S. Marshals, Treasury agents, and HHS has even provided doctors out there to help the team. And what they are, they're a team, and they are working hand in hand. If you couldn't see their shirts on their insignia, you wouldn't know what agency they were with. I've truly never seen a partnership like that in my career, and it's working together, and that's what Illinois is refusing to do. And I wish these senators, I wish Senator Durbin would condemn the governor of Illinois and have him work with us, like we're doing now in Memphis. We have the governor of Memphis. We have our two great U.S. senators in Memphis. We have the mayor of Memphis, the same, the chief, working hand in hand there.
Last week, maybe the week before last, I lose track of the days, we had the head of the Metropolitan Police Union for the District of Columbia here, and I asked him about violent crime in our communities. And I asked him whether there was a straight line from the open border policies of the Biden administration, which helped facilitate the cartels from exporting their poison to the United States, only to then find it distributed by criminal gangs who then engage in violence in our communities, like Chicago, to protect their territory and the profits that go along with that illegal drug trafficking. But I want to ask you about another aspect of the open border policies, and that has to do with one of the least reported tragedies and scandals associated with the Biden open border policies, and that has to do with the 500,000 children, sometimes called unaccompanied children, UACs, 500,000 children that the Biden administration allowed to be placed with sponsors in this country that were largely unvetted, and subjecting them to who knows what, and then abandoning them by taking the position that it's not the federal government's responsibility, it's local child protective agencies that have to follow up on these kids. So they couldn't tell you whether they were being trafficked, recruited into gangs, whether they were going to school, whether they were getting the health care that they need. They couldn't tell you because they didn't care. So I know that President Trump's administration, the Department of Justice in particular, has located 22,000 of these 500,000 children. Could you talk to us a little bit about your efforts to rescue these children that had been abandoned by the Biden administration?
Yes, and Senator, thank you for asking that question. President Trump cares deeply about our children of this country and children from around the world. This is horrific what has been happening in our country. Law enforcement has arrested approximately 458 sponsors. Now, what these sponsors are, they lie to ORR, many of them, to have an unaccompanied alien child. Some of them later exploit and abuse these children. They're not parents, they're not guardians. They're coming into this country, they were coming into this country without any ramification across the Mexican border until Donald Trump became president again, and that's when it stopped. We are doing everything in our power to find and arrest these people who are exploiting these children and find these children throughout our country. One of those cases, we charged a Guatemalan national unlawfully residing in Cleveland with lying to government because he became the sponsor of a young girl. And of course, we found he was later sexually abusing her. That's one of many cases, Senator Cornyn, that I can talk about. And Donald Trump will not rest until all of these sponsors are found and these children are found and protected.
Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney General Bondi, good morning. I'm going to start on a different subject.
Good morning.
On behalf of families in my state. And I wanted to thank the FBI and the local justice officials in Minnesota, the U.S. Attorney's Office, for the work that they did catching the murder, in the horrific murder of my friend, Speaker Melissa Hortman, and her husband, and the shooting of Senator John Hoffman. Just last month, my state was again shaken to its core when a mass shooter attacked Annunciation Catholic Church in Minnesota, shooting through the stained glass windows, injuring 21 people, including 18 kids, killing little Fletcher, little Harper, an 8 and a 10-year-old, murdering them when they're in mass praying, 12-year-olds protecting 8-year-olds. I know we've spoken about these tragedies, and we both agree that this kind of violence, whether in Minnesota or at a Mormon church in Michigan or the assassination of Charlie Kirk, has no place in our politics or in our democracy. In 2018, after the Parkland shooting, you were Attorney General, and there was a bill called the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Act. And the bill banned bump stocks, enacted red flag laws, and raised the minimum age to purchase a firearm in Florida from 18 to 21. And you actually defended the law in court from a challenge from the NRA. And we know that I'm in favor of an assault weapon ban, period. I look at these bills and I think, does this hurt my Uncle Dick in the deer stand? We have a proud tradition of hunting in Minnesota. I don't think they do. But as I talked to Director Patel, and he told me in the chair you are sitting in right now, that assault weapon bans could prevent future attacks. I talked to him about better background checks, about red flag laws, and then that perhaps we could find common ground on what actually happened in Florida, which would be to at least change the minimum age for purchasing assault weapon, because we've got 18 to 20-year-olds commit gun homicides at over triple the rate of adults 21 years and over, even though that wouldn't helped in Annunciation Church because he was a few years older. She was a few years older. But as you know, the shooter at Parkland was 19 years old, and the shooters in Buffalo and Uvalde were both 18 years old. So given your efforts in Florida, do you agree that at least raising the age for purchasing assault weapons could reduce the number of these shootings?
Senator, first, that's pending litigation, and I can't discuss that at all. The 21 is pending litigation. I cannot discuss
In
that.
Florida?
But if I could go back
I really
the
didn't know
21
this.
age is pending litigation. I can't discuss that. But Senator, back to what you said about what happened in Minnesota, there is no place for that. And I believe I spoke to you after that horrific, those murders. And I'm so sorry that happened. And all of my federal agencies were partnering with state agencies, working hand in hand in Minnesota. What I can tell you about the Second Amendment is this is the most pro-Second Amendment DOJ in American history, as you know. But we want to keep guns, as you said, where they should be, in the hands of law-abiding American citizens, while keeping them out of the hands of criminals and gangs. Since January 20th, the ATF and FBI have seized more than 30,000 illegal guns.
I have 10 minutes.
30,000.
You have given these statistics, and I truly appreciate those statistics. But what I was just trying to get at was something where maybe we could find common ground on a bill that you actually defended in court in a state, which Director Patel seemed open to, and that was looking at could we at least raise the age to 21 of the purchase of an assault weapon federally while states look at banning these weapons overall, given these little babies that this gun is used to kill. So we can talk about it later, but that was my question, and you don't want to answer it.
No, it's pending litigation, Senator.
Okay, but your views on this is not pending litigation. So I want to get to the independence of the Justice Department. At your nomination hearing, I specifically asked you to provide assurance to every member of this committee that the Justice Department will only follow the facts and the law, and the White House will play no role in the cases investigated or brought. You stated in response, this was you, politics will not play a part in my decisions. And you also said the Justice Department must be independent and must act independently. Do you believe that you have upheld that commitment?
I absolutely have upheld that commitment, Senator. I pledged that I would end the weaponization also of the Justice Department, and that America would once again have a one-tier system of justice for all. And that is what we are doing in this country.
We saw this with the president directing an investigation prosecution of Chris Krebs, the former head of cybersecurity, Lisa Cook, who is a current governor of the Federal Reserve, Director Comey. And the president, and I know you have said that you will not discuss discussions you've had with the president about Comey. Is that correct? That you won't testify here about that? Because I was going to ask you if you received advice, instruction, or request from anyone at the White House to direct the department to engage in any investigations, prosecutorial actions, including decisions not to investigate or prosecute anyone.
I'm not going to discuss any conversations.
But then how about the Truth Social post on September 20th, 2025, in which the president said, we can't delay any longer, Pam, using your name, not bringing criminal charges, are killing our reputation, his words, and credibility. And then goes on to tell you to prosecute a member of this committee, to prosecute the Attorney General of New York, and to prosecute James Comey. Do you consider that a directive to the Justice Department?
Senator Klobuchar, President Trump is the most transparent president in American history. And I don't think he said anything that he hasn't said for years.
Okay, it has been reported that you initially pushed back against requests by senior Trump administration officials to push out or fire the acting U.S. Attorney in Virginia, Eric Siebert, who's a conservative Republican, who made the decision that the evidence was not there to prosecute Comey. What made you change your opinion?
I am not going to discuss personnel decisions.
Okay. Is it true that the career prosecutors in the Eastern District of Virginia found that there was insufficient evidence to bring criminal charges against former Director Comey?
I am not going to discuss pending cases because Comey was indicted in the Eastern District of Virginia by, I may point out, one of the most liberal grand juries in the country.
Okay, let's go on to other firings or terminations. Last week, the Justice Department fired at least 2 senior attorneys in the Eastern District of Virginia, including the office's national security chief, Michael Benary. It is reported that his firing came following criticism from a right-wing social media commentator who wrote, "One can only assume he was part of the internal resistance in the Comey indictment." In fact, he did not work on the Comey case. Instead, he was working on pursuing justice for service members killed in Afghanistan. How does firing a 20-year national security prosecutor enhance public safety?
Senator Klobuchar, I'm not going to discuss personnel decisions, but the personnel issue that I'm having right now is that all of my agents, all of my lawyers are working. My agents are on the street working without a paycheck because your party voted to shut down the federal government.
Unfortunately, the House isn't even back here. They're 18 days off the job to even meet with us to come up with a resolution that we would like to discuss with them about saving people's health care. Let's move on to the Antitrust Division. Did you authorize your chief of staff to overrule top officials in the Antitrust Division to settle the challenge to the Hewlett-Packard Enterprises Juniper Networks merger?
Senator Gail Slater runs my antitrust unit, and she is doing an excellent job on many, many cases. As you know, that is a pending case.
Okay.
In any merger, just to clarify, in any merger, Senator, there is a deal struck with our office and with the corporations involved, but then that also goes to a court to certify in any merger. In any merger, it's a multi-step process.
Okay, I
and
will
that
ask some
process
further
is still pending,
questions
Senator
about
Klobuchar.
antitrust. I just had one other thing. DOJ can now take the extraordinary step of
Time's
subpoenaing
expired.
journalists. Has the Justice Department issued any subpoenas to journalists under the updated guidance?
Time has expired.
Okay, I'll ask those on the record.
You may respond, Ms. Bondi.
You can respond, she said.
Oh. Senator, my office in April restored the Justice Department's longstanding norm on this issue. It was AG Garland who had deviated on the media investigations policy, allowing self-identified journalists using this self-serving status as a shield against being held accountable for endangering our nation's security. We have taken that policy back to the norm, and I can't comment on whether we have or have not, or do not have pending investigations.
Time has
Senator
expired.
Klobuchar.
Senator Lee, you're recognized.
Attorney General Bondi, thank you for being here today, and thanks for your service as Attorney General of the United States. I want to start by thanking you for acknowledging a moment ago the importance of protecting the rights of the law-abiding. In a country where there are hundreds of millions of guns, one of the most alarming, not to mention unconstitutional things the government could do is to disarm the law-abiding. It would be unfair, it would be fatal to many, it would be contrary to our constitutional system. And I appreciate you standing up for that. I'm also grateful for you standing up for Gail Slater, the Assistant Attorney General over the Antitrust Division. I have full confidence in her, and I can tell you do as well. More broadly, Attorney General Bondi, through your leadership, you've returned the Department of Justice to its core mission. And its core mission, of course, involves protecting the American people, upholding the law, upholding the Constitution, and making sure that justice in our system is applied even-handedly, fairly, consistently, as the law requires, without fear, favor, or political bias making those decisions. With you as Attorney General at the helm of this great department, the Department of Justice has strengthened its efforts to secure our borders against what has been an unprecedented influx of illegal immigration. It's disrupted sophisticated networks of criminals, including people who profit immensely and have profited over the last 5 years, roughly, from a massive human trafficking and drug smuggling operation. And it also just demonstrated an unwavering commitment to the safety of American citizens. Your work has sent a clear message to criminal organizations and to criminally minded people everywhere, foreign and domestic. The rule of law in the United States will be enforced, and those who prey on the vulnerable will face especially swift and unpleasant consequences. I'd also like to commend you and FBI Director Kash Patel, Deputy Director Dan Bongino for your collaboration with state and local law enforcement in my home state of Utah in assisting with the prompt apprehension of the shooter in the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk just a few weeks ago at Utah Valley University. Your leadership has helped reaffirm that the Department of Justice exists to preserve the rule of law, to protect the peace, the safety of the American people, and ensure that our constitutional republic endures for many generations to come. Now, due to the open border policies that we had in the previous administration, a number of individuals, a number that is unknown and unknowable, but that is estimated to be in the many millions, somewhat estimated at the low end, be in the 10 million range. Others say more like 15. Others say it's more than that.
But this unknown and unknowable number of individuals came across our border illegally. And an unknown number or percentage of those people are individuals who pose significant security risks, including some who were suspected terrorists. They were all allowed to enter the United States without proper vetting, in many cases without any vetting at all. What progress have you made so far, Attorney General Bondi, in solving some of those issues related to the illegal immigration of an estimated 10, 15 million, maybe more, over the last 4 years?
Senator Lee, we are working hand in hand with Kristi Noem, of course, the Director of Homeland Security. She has been doing an incredible job. All of our agencies are working in partnership with them at the direction of President Trump. He ran on the promise of making America safe and closing our borders, and that's what he did on day one. He has also declared many of these transnational gangs as terrorist organizations, which is exactly what they are. They have been coming into our country from Mexico, from Venezuela, from other countries. They have been setting up shop right in our country. They are narco-terrorists, and it is going to stop, and it is stopping under his watch. Our task forces are working hand in hand with Homeland Security. Director Patel, Deputy Director Bongino have been going non-stop to make America safe again. That's not just a slogan. That's protecting everyone in this room. That's what we're doing as a country. We don't care if you live in Chicago. We don't care if you live in Florida. We don't care if you live in Utah. President Trump wants everyone to be safe, including right here in Washington, D.C., and that's what he's been doing. Not only that, Senator Lee, the surge of drugs in this country has been horrific over the last 4 years. DEA they have seized 4,500 kilos of fentanyl powder and 50 million fentanyl pills, which I said earlier represents 370 million deadly doses of fentanyl. These transnational gangs, it's all about drugs and money, and they are destroying our country. They are destroying our children, and a lot of this fentanyl, as we know, is made, the precursors in China. They're coming in our country through Mexico and now other places, and under Donald Trump, it's going to stop because he has secured our borders, Senator Lee.
And we're very grateful for that effort. It's interesting to note, moreover, that under the leadership of your predecessor, the Department of Justice, the FBI, and others who routinely appear before this committee, when asked about the human smuggling operation going on across our southern border, routinely denied that fentanyl was coming in significant quantities through the human trafficking operation. They stated never with any evidence, never with any ability to back it up, to prove this was the case, that these things were coming across the points of entry through vehicles, through trucks, and otherwise. We know that not to be true, and we appreciate your work in exposing that. Now, in recent months, going along with this law enforcement effort, there's been a disturbing trend. It's a disturbing trend that seems to be on the increase in recent days and weeks. That is a rise of violence directed at federal law enforcement officers engaged in immigration-related arrests, including direct physical threats, organized riots outside of detention facilities, and most tragically, of late, a fatal shooting targeting an ICE facility in Dallas. Then just yesterday, it was reported that a cartel member in Chicago put a bounty, that's right, a bounty, out there offering $2,000 on information about any ICE officer and $10,000 for those who kill an ICE officer. Now, keep in mind, this information is not for kicks and giggles. It is not for a game of Trivial Pursuit. That information, for which the cartel member would pay $2,000, is there so that others can kill an ICE officer and get $10,000. That's what that is. Can you discuss what protections are essential to ensuring the safety of ICE officers and their families, and why requirements to display personal information and prohibiting them from ever wearing any kind of covering would represent a totally unacceptable, indefensible risk to their public safety.
Senator Lee, our federal agents have been doxxed, and many of you know what that means. It has happened to you on both sides of the aisle. Our federal agents' lives have been threatened. We spoke with Apple and Google to get the ICE Block app taken down. That was reckless and criminal in that people were posting where ICE officers lived. We worked with both Apple and Google to take that down.
It's stunning, I would add here, that it took as much work as it did by you to get them to take that down. Remember, in the days following January 6th, they took down all kinds of things, including a social media app called Parler, based on very thin evidence that was later largely rebutted, suggesting that people had been manipulating Parler in order to plan the January 6th attack. That wasn't true, and they took it down. I'm glad they have taken this Block ICE app down, but it's a shame that it took as long as it did and as much work on your part to get them to take it down.
I will tell you they were cooperative, and to correct myself, it was where they were going, the jobs they were doing. And that's what's been happening, because hundreds of organized rioters, Senator Lee, are showing up where our ICE officers are. And as you know, they have fireworks, they have gas masks. You know, they don't want our officers to be protected with their identity, yet they're wearing gas masks, they're wearing goggles. And they're
So it's okay
ramming
for them to
cars.
be safe. It's okay for Antifa to be safe. It's okay for those doing the bidding of international violent drug cartels to be safe. But heaven forbid, our ICE officers should be safe.
Thank you, Senator Lee.
Time has expired. Senator Coons, you're recognized.
Thank you, Senator Blackburn, and thank you to the committee for holding this oversight hearing. And Attorney General Bondi, thank you for your service and for being with us. I want to start with an area where I think we have a lot to agree on. In May, your Bureau of Prisons issued a directive to expand the availability of home confinement. The directive said it was rooted in the principle of smart, fair criminal justice reform, and explained that smart reform and public safety can go hand in hand, and that second chances are not just possible, they're necessary for a justice system worthy of the American people. There's more to do to implement this directive, but I appreciated the BOP's recognition of these principles. Could you briefly speak further about the work BOP Director Marshall and Deputy Director Smith, himself a former inmate, are doing with regard to reform, and what opportunities you see for us to do more?
Thank you, Senator Coons. And you have been a champion of that, and we believe in second chances. As a career prosecutor, I know that most people, even violent criminals, are going to be locked up and then they're going to be released. And that's why we need everyone to be a productive member of society. I believe in halfway houses, and that's part of what the First Step Act did. It gives people a second chance at life, and that's what Billy Marshall and Josh Smith have been doing, working hand in hand at the Bureau of Prisons. I talk to them constantly, and they are working so hard. In fact, they inherited a dysfunctional and neglected agency, and they are taking, despite more than $450 million being appropriated between 2019 and 2024, we found that funds had been diverted away from the Department of the Prisons, the Bureau of Prisons. And so they are doing everything to create more halfway houses and to give inmates everything they need to be successful upon release, but also by keeping America safe. And I just learned from Billy Marshall, we just made an incredible case that someone, I believe the case was in Texas, one of our federal prisons, no one was monitoring this. And there was someone who was caught with a drone dropping off recently cell phones,
Yep.
paraphernalia,
Let me follow up on that point, if I might, Attorney
many
General.
things that could cause violence within our prisons and allow criminal cartel networks to function within our federal prisons. And that's what a lot of this money is going for, to make our prisons safe within and so these criminals cannot function while they are in prison. But one good thing I can also add is we have given inmates, I think we've over doubled the amount of minutes they can have on their phones so they can talk to their family members, because we believe that is important.
One of the challenges federal probation officers face is massive caseloads. And I am about to introduce, hopefully reintroduce soon, a bill with Senator Lee that would improve our federal supervised release system by focusing resources on those who really need to be supervised and providing incentives to reduce oversight of those who've really made progress and who've changed the direction of their lives. It is broadly supported by law enforcement and a variety of policy groups, and I'd love to work with you on that, Madam Attorney General.
Yeah, and Senator, can I just add, because I just got the numbers. So what we have is $8.7 billion.
To speak them out loud. Every time you showed up, every time you reminded the world that they are still there, you
He's in the green room, everyone. Shouldn't be much longer.
Morning, everyone. Before I proceed any further, let me acknowledge the 2-year anniversary of the horrific terrorist Hamas attack on the people of Israel on October 7th, 2023. More than 1,200 Israeli citizens and many American citizens were brutally murdered, and hundreds more were violently kidnapped and held captive in Gaza. Later on today, I'll meet with several hostages who thankfully were released, as well as the families of those whose loved ones were tragically killed in Gaza. 2 years later, it's incredibly important that every single hostage is returned and returned at the same time. It's important that we restore the ceasefire that Donald Trump inherited and that was broken in a matter of weeks during the Trump presidency. It's important that the devastation in Gaza end and that we surge humanitarian assistance into Gaza to provide relief to Palestinian civilians who for 2 years have been in harm's way in a theater of war through no fault of their own. And it's important that we find a just and lasting peace that can be implemented for the good of the people of Israel, our close ally, and for the good of the Palestinian people, so that we have Israel and the Palestinian people living side by side in peace, security, and prosperity. This is day 7 of the Trump shutdown of the federal government. And Democrats in the House and Democrats in the Senate continue to hold the line on behalf of the American people. Why? Because we're fighting to protect their health care in the midst of a crisis that has been inflicted upon them by Republicans from the very beginning of Donald Trump's presidency. Republicans have hurt everyday Americans in order to reward their billionaire donors. That's what the One Big Ugly Bill was all about. Largest cut to Medicaid in American history. Stole food from the mouths of children, seniors, and hungry veterans in order to provide massive tax breaks, permanent in nature, to the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. Democrats have a very different approach to what we should be doing in order to make life better for the American people. And at this moment in time, that's addressing the Republican health care crisis. That is devastating. Millions of people all across the country. And because of the Republicans' continued refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, tens of millions of Americans are about to experience dramatically increased premiums, copays, and deductibles that will bankrupt them or deprive them of the health care that they need for themselves, their children, and their families. That's completely and totally unacceptable. And the government remains shut down right now because of the refusal and unwillingness by Donald Trump and Republicans to actually provide health care to working class Americans. That's an unacceptable position, and that's why Democrats continue to fight this fight on behalf of the American people. Whether they live in a blue state, a purple state, or a red state, this fight that Democrats are waging is on behalf of all Americans. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Leader. I just want to get your take on this memo that's circulating in the White House that seems to suggest that furloughed workers may not get back pay. What is your reaction to that guidance, and is it your expectation that some type of language language to ensure back pay will be included in any final CR or bill once this shutdown is resolved.
Donald Trump and his administration have been torturing federal employees since the very beginning of his presidency, engaging in mass firings, harassing them, brutalizing them, laying people off without justification, and violating the law. So let me be clear to those hardworking federal employees who are now being victimized by this Trump Republican shutdown. We continue to stand with you, and will stand with you as we've done from the very beginning of this presidency. And the law is clear. Every single furloughed federal employee is entitled to back pay. Period, full stop. The law is clear, and we will make sure that that law is followed.
Mr. Leader, good morning. Thank you. I've been to dozens of these press conferences with you where you've had a screenshot up here of something that Marjorie Taylor Greene has said, usually something outrageous. Today, you're saying that she's making your point. Is the enemy of my enemy my friend in this case?
What I'm saying is that Democrats have been crystal clear that this fight is about the health care of the American people. Marjorie Taylor Greene acknowledges this fight is about the health care of the American people. It's Republicans, in terms of the leadership, that is missing in action, that is currently on vacation, that has canceled votes, and that refuses to deal with the health care crisis that Republicans have created. The cost of living in America is far too high. The Trump tariffs are adding thousands of dollars of additional expenses to everyday Americans. Right now, rents out of control. Right now, housing prices out of control. Right now, electricity bills skyrocketing. Right now, grocery costs out of control. Right now. And because of the Republican refusal to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, as Marjorie Taylor Greene herself has acknowledged, tens of millions of people are about to experience dramatically increased health insurance costs. How is that acceptable in the wealthiest country in the history of the world? It's not. And a growing number of Republicans clearly are adopting the enlightened Democratic position that this fight is about the health care of working class Americans, middle class Americans, and everyday Americans. Thanks. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Speaker Johnson spent some time in his statements this morning talking about New York and the impacts that'll see from the shutdown, saying that the state will lose $1.2 billion a month in GDP as the shutdown stretches on. Also, a recent CBS poll found majority of Americans are really concerned about the economic impacts of the shutdown. You say you speak with your constituents often. What are you hearing from them about the impacts that they're seeing? What's the attitude about the shutdown that they're having?
Democrats are really concerned about the Trump Republican shutdown and the fact that this is part of a pattern of continuing to devastate the American economy. The overwhelming majority of Americans right now, whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, or independent, collectively believe that the country is heading in the wrong direction. And the Republican shutdown is making things worse. Making things worse. Which is why we need to come to the table. We have repeatedly said, Leader Schumer, Senate Democrats, House Democrats have repeatedly said, we will sit down anytime, any place with anyone in the Trump administration or amongst congressional Republican leadership to reopen the government and to enact a spending agreement that actually makes life better for the American people. But it has to make life better for the American people, not for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. For everyday Americans, and it has to address the Republican health care crisis. Let me also make one other thing clear. This fight is not about what Speaker Johnson or Republicans want to make this Trump shutdown and this fight about. It's not about Chuck Schumer, and it's not about Hakeem Jeffries. It's about the American people. Democrats are fighting for you, the American people. Working class Americans, everyday Americans, and middle class Americans. That's what this fight is all about. People who have been suffering under the extremism of Trump and Republican policies, hurting everyday Americans to reward their billionaire donors. And the American people have had enough of the extremism that has been unleashed on them by the Trump administration and their failures around the economy. Costs aren't going down, they're going up. And we can't allow tens of millions of Americans who are both on the Affordable Care Act, like many veterans, or who get their health insurance through their employers, to experience massive hikes to their health care premiums, co-pays, and deductibles. That's what this fight is all about. It's not about us. This fight is about you, the American people. You deserve better. Thanks. Back. Yep.
If Reagan files Senate Democrats a negotiated deal that hasn't matched exactly what you described, would you provide the votes in the House to reopen the government?
Well, with respect to anything that emerges from the Senate, we'll have to evaluate it on its merits, and that's our intention. Leader Schumer and I are in regular contact. House Democrats and Senate Democrats are in regular contact with each other. And I'm thankful for the fact that Senate Democrats have continued to strongly and boldly hold the line. What is John Thune doing? What are they doing? 5 times they've brought this dead on arrival partisan Republican spending bill to the floor for a vote, and it's gone down 5 times. That's legislative insanity, doing the same thing and expecting a different result. It's not happening. It's not happening because House Democrats and Senate Democrats are standing up for the health care of the American people. So to the extent that anything emerges in terms of bipartisan discussions amongst Senate Democrats and Senate Republicans with full visibility involving House Democrats, then we'll have to evaluate anything that's presented on the merits. But the line in the sand has been clear. It has to decisively address the Republican health care crisis. Paul?
Today marks 2 weeks since Congresswoman-elect Grijalva won her race by more than 40 points. 3 white men won special elections this year and were sworn in less than 24 hours after the polls closed in their races. What's going on?
It's a very good question, and Mike Johnson has to actually answer that question as to why Republicans have refused to seat Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva. Why? She won her election decisively. She should have been sworn in yesterday during the pro forma session, which had occurred in April when 2 Republicans won special elections in Florida. They dramatically underperformed, won by margins that were far less than Representative-elect Grijalva, but they were sworn in immediately. And you know why they were sworn in immediately? Because Republicans at the time were focused on jamming their one big ugly bill down the throats of the American people. So when it comes to enacting massive tax breaks for Republican billionaire donors, they race to swear people in, which is what they did in April with those 2 extreme MAGA Republicans in Florida. But when it comes to Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva, who will represent a majority Latino district in Arizona, who's a Democrat, who has made clear that she will be the 218th signature on the petition to force a vote on the release of the Epstein files? House Republicans can't be bothered. But this is consistent with a group of people that's on vacation right now. I mean, that is the most extraordinary thing. These people, the extremists, are on vacation right now. The government is shut down. A healthcare crisis is unfolding before the eyes of the American people because of the actions taken by the GOP. They're on vacation and they're unwilling to swear in Representative-elect Grijalva. We're going to make sure we do everything possible to ensure that she is sworn in sooner rather than later, including going back to the floor of the House during the next pro forma session to demand that she be seated. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Speaker Johnson said this morning that we were always planning to have those conversations in the month of October with regard to the Affordable Care Act premium tax credits. In your conversations and discussions leading up to the shutdown and since, were you ever given the impression that Republicans had intended to have this conversation in October? I see you smirking. I want to get your sense of.
Oh, this is just my Brooklyn smile.
Maybe, but
So, I mean, really, this is what we're doing right now. Like Mike Johnson, this is an acknowledgement that the Democratic position is the American position, which is that this healthcare crisis has to be addressed right now. In that Oval Office meeting, Republicans had a very different position. That was just like a week ago. They had a very different position. They said, we have all the time in the world to address the Affordable Care Act tax credits. They don't expire until the end of the year. We have all the time in the world. Now, they're saying something very different, which is, yeah, we were planning to address it. Okay, if you're planning to address it, let's do it right now. Welcome on board to the fact that the Republican healthcare crisis has to be addressed right now. Very different position than the one that they took in that Oval Office meeting. We have consistently pointed out that how is it the case that you bent over backwards to pass your one big ugly bill, rip health care from millions of Americans, steal food from the mouths of hungry children in order to reward your billionaire donors, and those tax breaks that were enacted in connection with the Republican one big ugly bill, they were made permanent. And they expired on December 31st of this year. It was an unsustainable position, as Democrats have repeatedly pointed out, that Republicans raced to provide massive tax breaks for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected, setting the country on a path toward possible bankruptcy or financial ruin, skyrocketing the debt by more than $3 trillion, doing it on the backs of working-class Americans, because there was apparently urgency to renew those massive tax breaks because they expired on December 31st of this year. And then at the same time, taking the position in the Oval Office meeting and publicly that we have all the time in the world to deal with the healthcare crisis that we've created and the Affordable Care Act tax credits that are expiring. Of course, that was an unsustainable position. And I'm thankful that Republicans are now acknowledging it. But they still have to actually sit down at the negotiating table so we can resolve the issue, consistent with what Marjorie Taylor Greene has said needs to be done. Address the cost of living crisis that Republicans have made worse in the United States of America.
Leader Jeffries, there's a bipartisan bill in the House that's been introduced to do a one-year extension of these ACA subsidies. Is that acceptable to you, and how would you vote if that came up?
A one-year extension of the Affordable Care Act tax credits is not acceptable. It's a non-starter. It's a non-starter. It was introduced by the same people who just permanently extended massive tax breaks for their billionaire donors. Think about that. And now what they're saying to working class Americans who we're standing up for, middle class Americans who we're standing up for, and everyday Americans who we're standing up for, whose tax credits are about to expire and they're getting ready to face dramatically increased premiums. And we're talking about veterans, we're talking about farmers, we're talking about ranchers, we're talking about everyday Americans. And they only get a 1-year extension? Like, what world are these MAGA extremists living in right now? To think that Democrats are going to go along with a 1-year extension from a group of people, meaning the Republicans, who just permanently extended massive tax breaks for their billionaire donors. It's a laughable proposition. It makes no sense. The Democratic position has been clear, permanent extension. And let's go from there in terms of a negotiation.
Leader Jeffries, thank you. We talked about how President Trump said yesterday he's willing to work with Democrats and have the conversation about health care. You just said you and Leader Schumer would also be willing to do that. What's stopping Democratic leaders from picking up the phone or just requesting a meeting with the White House, even if Republican leaders here are not on board with that?
We demanded a meeting with the White House initially. The White House agreed to the meeting. Then Donald Trump backed out of the meeting. And then public pressure caused him to have the meeting again. And we're clear, subsequent to that, that the line of communication remains open on our end. And we look forward to sitting down with any high-level member of the administration, any serious member of the administration, including, of course, the president, the vice president, or others who they may designate at an appropriate time and place, if they're serious about actually getting resolution to the Republican healthcare crisis that they now acknowledge needs to be addressed. Let's address it on behalf of the American people. Let's reopen the government. Let's end the Trump shutdown. Let's actually enact a spending agreement that makes life better for the American people.
One of the things that's been floated is sort of capping the Obamacare program, not allowing new enrollees to have the subsidy or income limits. Are you open to any of those ideas?
I mean, let's be clear about one thing here again. The notion that a group of people who just jam these permanent tax breaks down the throats of the American people for their billionaire donors, suggesting that the Affordable Care Act tax credits should not be made available to small